Okay, it's two after, so I'm gonna go ahead and get us started just so we can stay on time. And then again, if you're just coming in, we were just asking people to let us know in the chat how you heard about the webinar, just so we know. And also if you want to share where you're from.
alliance. And they scratch that out saying, by declaring that he will lay the city of Williamsburg, lay waste. They're going back and forth. They say, emancipate our slaves. And, and then they cross that out and they move emancipate our slaves later and then destroy the country and other wicked and hostile deeds. Right. So here we have these potential revolutionaries who are writing about all these horrible things that Lord Dunmore is doing and why they're mad at him. So if this looks familiar, this is because this is one of the central points of the New York Times 1619 project, which, probably one of the things that got the biggest press was this assertion that Americans declared their independence in reaction to rising abolitionist sentiment in Britain that threatened to end slavery. And you've got all this back and forth. You've got socialist and conservative historians saying, no, that wasn't really it. And, back and forth. But it all revolves around documents like the ones that we just read, right? So how do historians find these documents? So traditionally, everything has to be transcribed by humans. And here's the example of me doing that. Then we have these HTR models. So this is another example of Transcribus. This is a much better example. It's much less garbage than the one we saw before, which I find interesting because on first glance, this doesn't look like a much easier document to read than Lord Gower, but it kind of is. Then we tried doing the same thing with ChatGPT 4.0, and we even tried saying, oh, okay, do a little markup while you're working on this. So how do these compare with each other, right? ChatGPT's results make a lot more sense than Transcribus English Eagle. But what are they missing? Right? If you were trying to research Lord Dunmore and slavery and emancipate, you don't see them in either one, right? Neither one is going to work for a full text search, but if you were presented with both of these as transcripts, the Transcribus example, if you look at the fourth to last line, we have emancipate olaves and indrupate olhaves. You might want to go take a look at that document. And you don't see that at all in the LLM output, right? It eliminates any hint of slavery, emancipation, or Lord Dunmore. It also marked some passages that had been struck through as if they were not. It misread destroy as devour, but it doesn't look obviously wrong. Which of these tools has a better character error rate? I don't know, and I kind of don't care, right? The Transcribus output is obviously raw. It needs correction. It looks tentative. The ChatGPT output looks plausible, but that plausibility is treacherous. And if we ask an LLM about subjects mentioned in text, which typically they're very good at, the result kind of speaks for itself. So I'm going to pass this over to Sarah to talk about where HTR works and where it doesn't.
So you can tell from that we kind of think HTR is more trustworthy, right? You have things that indicate that perhaps it's a problem, and in a way that LLMs perhaps we don't want to use. So we did a lot of work using the Transcribus APIs with a set of documents from customers that were willing to work with us and let us run it through it, and then go and work with their volunteers and transcribers and get feedback on how people used it, liked it, the quality, where it worked, things like that. So let's talk a little bit about that. So my first set of examples are actually from North Carolina. These are all University of North Carolina, the Cameron family papers. When we ran HTR on that, they sent us a lot of examples of places where things were good and not good and things like that. So this is the first one. This is what we would call, very difficult handwriting. It's kind of hard to read, right? And next slide. Transcribus did an amazing job with this. If you look at this, you can read the HTR. It's not perfect, right? But it is pretty high quality. And so in this particular case, it's a good match. Like this technology applied to this document, thumbs up. Like I think there, even if you don't do any post-processing, there might be value to having it as searchable text. Here's another Cameron Family Papers document, and it has a ton of bleed through, right? Really, probably a really thin paper. And I don't know about you, but this makes it very hard for me to read. If we go to the next slide, this is what Transcribus could see in it. And it basically ignores the bleed through. It has no problem reading differentiating the main text versus the text that's bleeding through from the reverse side. I'd actually say it's probably better at doing this than a human would be, which is kind of cool, right? Kind of interesting, because everything else we've shown you, we're like, nope, 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 but here's a place where it probably is better. Another example is cross-writing. So this is a letter that has cross-writing at the top. And what's interesting about cross-writing and these HTR services is that they first do segmentation. They look and break things down line by line. So if we go to the next thing, you can see that the horizontal lines, it does fine. The vertical lines does not even try, but on top of that, it actually kind of interrupts or gets in the way of the handful of horizontal lines that we have on that. And I'd actually say, for the horizontal stuff, it was fine. For the actual cross-writing, in a system like From the Page, we let you rotate the image so you could actually, turn it and read it and transcribe it. So I would, say maybe a human would be better in this particular case.
It's crazy because it's so similar to the bleed through example, but the results are so different.
So different, right? Yeah. So it's interesting. It just, because they're doing the segmentation first, it cannot handle the fact that it's been turned. This is an example that, this is an old, faded, damaged document, right? And let's go see how Transcribus did on this. Right? I, as a human, think I would also have a really hard time with this document. It is really hard to read. So it shouldn't
I think we could
surprise
do
us.
better.
Yeah, I think we might be able to do better. I actually think this is a good example where a human and HTR output collaborating might get you further down the road than either one working in isolation. So that's kind of interesting. So our next set of examples are from the Carnegie Hall archives. So they have booking ledgers and some financial records about who were performing in different venues within Carnegie Hall at different times. And so these are working documents, right? And what's interesting is, like, in this first example, we have some penciled in text. That's what's circled in red. And Transcribus just didn't get it at all. Like, totally missed it. It's like, nope, not gonna do it. The next example is 100% pencil, and it does a much better job in that case of transcribing it, because you don't have the variation, right? This is almost the same as the bleed through example, where the pencil is so faint that it's like, oh, that's not important. But in this case, the pencil is the text, the script, right? So it can read it. I don't think it did a particularly great job here, but
it didn't leave great big parts out.
But it didn't, it tried everything at least, right? And the next example, we've got text in red pen. And it's interesting because this was even worse than the penciled in stuff. Again, we just kind of skipped it completely. The next example, we have some kind of notes that are inserted between the lines. And this one's kind of interesting because it's pencil and red pen. So both of our problem, even know there's probably a technical word that you guys know that I don't know about what the form factor is here. And it gets a little bit of this, but it really has trouble because of that line segmentation bit, recognizing that these are new lines of text and transcribing them.
Like, it got to cache correctly, but refund deposit it totally missed.
Wow. Yeah. And I think it gets the thing underneath refund deposit, which is probably on the previous line. So it actually works line segmentation wise. Yeah. So, it's interesting. The places where it works really well and the places where it doesn't work so well. And it's just useful to start understanding that, because then you can evaluate your collections and think, might this be a good source, a good potential, project for AI to help me with, or not? So, okay. So how could we use some of these technologies, right? We're casting a lot of aspersions on them, showing you where they don't really work, showing you in some cases where they do surprisingly work. And so what we want to know is, we have these cool new tools. How can we use them? So the first place that we have experimented using these is helping humans read cursive. So all the screenshots I just showed you are actually from what we call our AI assist feature. So what we do is we take page images and we send them to Transcribus via their API, and we ask for the text back. And then when you're in the transcription screen from the page, you can click this AI assist button that we have this great big arrow to, and what it does is it overlays that HTR on top of the image. So, the cool thing about this is you get to decide. You turn it on, you turn it off.
One of our principles of using AI is that it needs to be optional.
Right. A lot of the user testing we did with this feature, a lot of our volunteer transcribers are older, they're retirees. They're good at cursive. They don't really need this, except sometimes they do. And they like the ability to zoom in on a particularly hard to read word and turn on AI assist. And it's like asking someone to look over your shoulder and say, can you tell what that word is? What do you think it is? And like, what's before it? What's after it? Like, let's try to figure it out. And it's just having another opinion.
Here's an example of zooming in on
Right, zooming in on
word.
station. That does not look like station, but it actually, this is a
It's a Australian farm diary, so it probably is a sheep station.
Station, yeah. So one of the other ways, actually, can we go back for a second? So, our retirees use this sparingly. We also did user testing with some undergraduates at University of Maryland, and they're like, just give me the text. Why do I have to look at the image? And so one of the things that they tested for us, and they were more enthusiastic about, is what we call the AI text option. So same text from Transcribus, right? But you can click on this button that says AI text. It's grayed out because we'd already clicked on it on this page. And we'll give you the HTR text from Transcribus. In this particular case, what we do with that text, because we want to undermine it, we do not want people, we especially don't want 19-year-olds, trusting the data that's coming from the machine. We have this tendency to give computers too much authority. And so what we've done is we've taken that text, we've sent it to ChatGPT, we've asked it to correct it. We throw away all the corrections because they're trash, right? We know that they're poisoned text, right? But every place it made a change, we've replaced with this confused face emoji. And part of the reason we chose this emoji is because we are trying, it's that undermining, right? We want it to not be taken seriously.
We want AI results to appear tentative instead of authoritative.
Right.
And we want it to be transparent that, hey, this came from AI. So this is one of the goals here.
Right. So the idea is that you can examine the text at a much closer, you have to go look at the image and figure out what does it actually say and replace those confused face emojis. One of the things that we discovered is that even if you do all of that, you replace all of those emojis, the text still may not be right. You actually have to go back and read it and read the original document because ChatGPT didn't change everything.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. But then it's not looking at the page either. We're just sending it the text. We have another version of this. Okay, so this we did because this is terrible because we love our volunteers, but we don't trust our volunteers not to just take the text and move on, right? But we do have another version where we don't do this whole confused face emoji and you just get a draft. To us, that is more appropriate for scenarios where you have got a research group that's working together and that they're kind of committed to the quality, or you have a staff project, or you're running a private transcription project and your volunteers and that they're going to do quality work, that they care about that. So that's we're experimenting with all these. We don't really know where we're going to end up.
Right. Speaking of experiments.
Right. So, okay. After we built this and we talked about, we did all this testing and things, I turned to Ben, I'm like, okay, obviously the next thing we should do is something that addresses field and form-based data. So next slide. A lot of this type of data is boring. It's not fun to transcribe. In fact, I looked at Ben when we were preparing this presentation. I'm like, okay, I need a form-based example that's really boring. He's like, photoplankton. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's go find photoplankton. This is a project out of Stanford. It's the Monterey Bay Historical Phytoplankton Project. It's really boring. It's observations of phytoplankton.
From the 1950s.
Yeah, very important. But so this is the type of thing we are thinking about when we think about what are our boring forms. We think that this is the sort of thing that might work well for AI because of a couple of reasons. So it's not as much fun to transcribe as letters or field books.
So there's less appeal for at least our volunteer base, your volunteers as well.
It's more like data than text, right? Which means it should suffer less from plausibly seductive AI hallucinations, right? The narrative material, it's going to try to make plausible sentences. There's not a plausible sentence to be gotten from something like this, right? So luckily for us, around the same time we were having these conversations, a kind of perfect project arrived. Our colleague Nick Zemeski at the Industrial Archives and Library, he emailed me. He's like, hey, we've got a bunch of these engineering designs. They all have pretty standard data written in this kind of clear draftsman hand in the bottom right of all of the designs. Is there any way we can automate this? So that was Nick's thing. And Ben's like, well, what if we actually, so our first question was, could we automate this? So we did some experiments where we ran it through, in this case, we used Google Gemini as the large language model. And the nice thing about that is it actually you can ask it to pull out particular fields. So that was kind of interesting as well. And it did a pretty good job. We'll show you that in a minute. But about the same time we were doing that, Ben's like, well, what if we ran the pages through two different models and we compared the results, right? And we could highlight the places where the two models differed in their interpretation of the text on the page. And then we could ask humans to be the tiebreakers. In AI terms, this is called consensus-based validation, although usually folks just throw a lot of models at the task and they forget that humans might be better tiebreakers. So next slide. These are kind of our model results. So on the left is Gemini 2.0 Flash. That's the model I used for my experiments. On the right, our colleague at University of Waterloo, Mike Cooper-Stokowski, ran our sample cards through an open source model, which is interesting too, because if you're hesitant to, send your documents for processing to one of the big large language models, there are options out there. They don't always work as well, but sometimes they do, that are kind of open source. You can run them on your own computers. You can download them. You can kind of have more control. So this one's called Quinn VL 72B. Here's what we learned. Next slide. So on the left is a feature we have from the page that we call the versions tab, and it lets us compare, multiple edits to a page. And in this case, we just inputted the information from each of our models as the first version, and then as the second version, so we can see where they disagreed, where they differed. And the results from both models were really good. They weren't perfect, but they were of surprisingly high quality. Even with that surprisingly high quality, our transcriptions differed quite a bit between the models. My first thought was that we'd flag pages with any differences for human review, and it turns out we'd flag every single page, which wasn't going to work. One of the things that this process kind of suggested to us is that projects that want to do this kind of automation maybe should simplify the task by reducing the number of fields collected. So on this particular one, our models really tended to disagree on scale and on approved. Approved is a signature, right? So it doesn't surprise us that much. And it's a name that's also kind of hard. It's not predictable. And scale, I'm not sure why it got it wrong, but it got it wrong a lot. But it turns out the Industrial Archives doesn't actually care about those two fields. It doesn't make these designs more findable, right? They're useful pieces of information to have, but you can read them off the image once you find the interesting design that you want to go research, right? Sometimes actually the results differed between different runs against the same model, right? Same image, same model, different answers each time, which is kind of interesting, right? But they were the harder to read fields, like scale and, approved by. And so it's an interesting idea that even running it through one model and looking at where it wasn't as certain, it's a way to measure uncertainty of particular data or particular fields. So it kind of suggests that maybe we could do this just with a single model as well. For this experiment, the Gemini model was better than Quinn. It filled in more fields, it produced fewer character errors, but not substantially. So.
But this was just run on about a half dozen different cards, right?
Right. But we're going to run this on 130,000 of these cards.
Yeah, so this is kind of our next step, and this is something we will be presenting on at some point once we get results. But the first thing we want to do is test whether this consensus-based approach of looking for differences between different models actually represents errors. Our goal is to have humans fix the cards that have the highest errors and identify those. So we'll be doing the sample, getting ground truth, figuring out the difference between the model outputs, figuring out whether that corresponds to actual errors. And then if it does, and we again suspect it does, then what we'll do for the whole rest of the project is run 2 or more models on each card in the whole corpus, figure out the character differences between the cards, and then correct the cards that have the highest character differences.
The places where your 2 models disagree,
yeah,
a human needs to look at that and correct it.
Right. So the hardest stuff will be corrected by hand, and then at some point we'll figure out a point of diminishing returns where the only differences are punctuation or things like that, and then we'll approve the remainder of them.
And we're kind of hoping that one of the things we can figure out, maybe by the time you get through whatever this set of human reviewed cards is, and in this case, the human doing the review is going to be the archivist rather than volunteers. That's his choice. But maybe we'll find that one model is better than the other, that his corrections tend to match one of the models and not the other.
Or maybe we'll find that, one of the models is great at job number, but terrible at something else. And the other model is great at these other fields. And so, all right, well, let's just use this model for job number and these are, everything else from the other model. We don't know yet.
We don't know. But, unlike the Lord Dunmore example, the LLM data from this is good. It's not bad. It may not be as perfect as you would want it to be, but it does not undermine the research task. And we're hoping that it is good enough, and we'll get through enough of them with human corrections that it's pretty good. It's good enough, right? And it's kind of hard to know what good enough is, but they don't have any indexing of these 130,000 cards. So again, anything is perhaps better than nothing.
So all of this stuff is still developing. The AI tech will only get better. We're not sure that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
if it can figure out how to say I don't know, right? This is the problem, is it never says I don't know. I can't tell, right? That's the problem.
Yeah.
But
so we do try to do webinars on this stuff, a couple times a quarter, and we record them all, and we do a monthly newsletter about thoughts on AI things or AI in archives or crowdsourcing
and our webinars are always at the bottom of those newsletters. So
yes.
That's what the QR code is. If you're interested in our newsletter, that's how you can sign up for it. The tiny URL is our YouTube playlist. Let's leave this up for just a little bit. We'll leave it up while we start doing some questions.
Yeah, we can also paste them in the chat too. Right. So that's the end of our presentation.
Yes, so we have about 15 minutes for questions. So if you all will just put those in the chat and I will ask them. If you have a complicated question you would rather verbalize, just put your hand up on your profile and we can call on you. It looks like we do have one, at least so far. It says, for human transcription, if you want full text search to function, do you recommend typing out into modern English? For example, should the transcription say Samuel instead of Sam apostrophe L? Yeah. But now you don't have an authentic direct transcription.
Right. Okay. So here's what we think. We think you should do a verbatim transcription, like a diplomatic one that you would do if you were a historian doing a scholarly edition, and ask your volunteers to do that if you're doing human transcription. And then you should send that through one of the large language models and ask it to, what's the right word?
Regularize
Regularize it, normalize it. They're really good at that. We have examples of that in some of our webinars, 10 ways.
Yeah, I think it's the 10 ways webinar. Yeah, we've done a lot of experiments on using AI tools for regularization for screen readers and for full text search. And so far we have been very pleased with the results, with the exception of a little bit of censorship that the AI models have done.
They don't like to talk about unpleasant things, and part of your job is to surface the unpleasant facts of history, right?
Yeah, so we still want typing, we still encourage verbatim transcription.
Yeah.
And then doing derivatives afterwards.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that we think is going to happen in this new world is you're going to end up with a lot of derivatives, a lot more than you've ever had before. We're also happy to do like a lot of what we're trying to do is figure out what to build into tools like From the Page by doing projects like with Nick. That's we're going to build some features into From the Page to help us do Nick's project, and then hopefully that will roll into things that everyone gets to use in a year or two.
Yeah, but we want to get it right.
Yeah, which means we want collaborators that will let us do a lot of this together. So. Really? No more questions? Come on, guys. This is AI. You've got comments, you've got opinions. Okay, good.
Okay, so we looks like we have another question. Oh, comment. Nancy Kaiser says, I'm really interested in the idea of using two different tools if necessary for transcribing slavery era account books. On the one hand, we want the transcription of numbers and structuring of the data to be good. On the other hand, what we really want to uncover are the names of enslaved people who are mentioned.
Yeah, one of the challenges with account books is there's the human stories and then there's the numbers. And they kind of go together. I mean, we're dealing with a project that we run ourselves, dealing with account books in which, you've got a plantation diary and the guy has diary entries and he's got account books. And the main place that the enslaved people are mentioned is in the account books. That's the main place those stories are. And it's so important. But the account books are all over the map. Like, they are very heterogeneous. Sometimes there'll be lists of IOUs, sometimes there'll be lists of hogs that are slaughtered, and it's a mess.
I have two comments to add to that too. So one is for kind of findability purposes, the numbers don't matter. Nobody actually wants to know how much you paid someone or for someone, or, like a historian might, an individual might, but if you keep the transcript with the image, they can go read the image too, right? So, one of the things is push down how much you might need the numbers,
Yeah,
right?
Is this perhaps really an indexing project?
Right.
Rather than a transcription project?
But one of the other things, and we think of it, okay, so we work with the Alabama Department of Archives and History. They have all of these antebellum
Supreme Court cases.
And a lot of them are like property related, right? It's estate work and things like that. And the reason they want to transcribe them is because that is the only place that some people's names are mentioned, especially if you were enslaved. But do you really want to transcribe 200 pages of court proceedings to find the 5 names that are on 5 pages scattered across there? So one of the ideas that we've had that it's hard to kind of figure out how to do unless we go do a bunch of experiments, but I think you could send a page to a large language model and just ask, is an enslaved person mentioned on this page?
Using it as a metal detector almost on a beach to know where to focus your efforts, where to transcribe, where to read.
And bad transcriptions might be okay for that, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the thoughts we have, is like, trying to pull out those relevant pages that you know then what you want a human to look at and help you transcribe. So yeah. Yeah, workflow using two tools. Yeah. It probably will be complicated. We're excited about this one because it's just fields, right? And we have our software can handle the data. We'll have to do some tweaks, but yeah.
And it looks like Nicole has a question. Is the inability to pick up the red ink or light pencil because they're trained, built for black or blue text and writing more stark contrast from the page, or just because of the conflict between multiple lines or notes within lines?
We think, based on observing when this happens, that here's a hypothesis. The same thing that lets transcribers ignore the bleed through while identifying the text that's actually written in ink on that side of the page may be like that great ability may also mean that when you have different colors of text, you have pencil and pen mixed together or red and blue mixed together, that's why it's ignoring all of one hand.
It's all about the contrast. Yeah, that's our theory. And that's yeah, I think it's right. Maybe. We haven't tried that sort of material with like an LLM. I don't know whether it'd be any better.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Looks like Logan has a question. Go ahead.
Sorry, I've typed and erased and typed again, trying to figure out how to phrase this. But have y'all in your research interrogated how to sort of balance or square the negative environmental impact of the use of generative AI with potentially reducing cost or increasing ease of transcription within the archive?
We have so many opinions.
I started writing a newsletter on this and discovered I just don't know enough as part of the challenge, right?
We've done a lot of research. I think AI has a lot of problems. I think we have to be very careful about figuring out which problems are most important. So, the AI impact comes down to electricity and water. From everything that I've read, wearing a cotton shirt is much worse than using ChatGPT in terms of water usage. That's not true for electricity usage, however, right? And I'm currently much more worried about the cognitive atrophy, the information pollution, those sides of things than I am about some of the environment. Like the AI companies are doing things like they have forced us to use cheaper models that use less energy in the
Well,
past.
I was at a lecture, a computer science lecture last night from our alma mater, and like this particular lecture, it was all about how to become more efficient at models, which is to translate is to run them cheaper, to translate is to use less energy, right? Everyone's working on this because it costs money, right? It's not so much about the environment, it's about the fact that it costs money.
Meanwhile, you have OpenAI releasing a TikTok clone that's 100% AI,
Well,
right? And so the cognitive.
Well, and okay, here's the other. This is what percentage of AI usage do you think archives could even possibly do? I'm sorry, we're just not that big as a sector, and
but some people are working on this, right? When I was at the Digital Humanities Conference a couple of months ago, a lot of people were demonstrating uses of HTR tools that were small enough to run on their MacBooks.
Wait, I'm going to one-up you this because last night I was talking after this talk, and there are LLMs. Like Apple has a built-in model on your phone if you have an iPhone, which is crazy. But if you think about the fact that you can take a picture of text and it will maybe give you that text, it will do HTR on the phone.
Yeah. So we're actually kind of optimistic about the environmental side of things. So that means we'll get more AI for less power.
but more.
Is
AI.
that a good thing? Is the thing that scares me. So I don't know how satisfying an answer is.
We don't have good answers. We had good answers. We'd give you a nice pat answer, but we don't really have one. Yeah. But I don't know, like, we want archives out there, right? We want historic documents to be part of the conversation, and yeah.
I want them to be real,
Yes, real.
not invented or
Right.
Yeah.
The first newsletter I wrote on AI was just a rant, because I'm like, archives are real. Like, archives are even more important in this large language world, because what large language models do is they statistically smooth all the text. So it's all so appealing and generic and boring. And if you put a primary source document in front of someone, it's not, right? It is an example. It's exemplar that, a student or even, a retiree has to grapple with and understand what is going on. I think they're even more important. I really, truly do. So yeah, that's my
rant.
So.
We probably have time for one more quick question if anybody has a burning question they want to ask. And I'm sure our speakers, if you didn't feel comfortable asking your question here, or you think of something later, I'm sure our speakers would be happy for you to reach out to them.
Sara at From the Page, Ben at From the Page. We didn't put that on the last.
Yeah, we should have put our
Yeah.
email addresses on the slide.
And we're always happy to talk about projects and approaches and
Worries.
Mhm.
Okay, I don't see any hands. So we will go ahead and wrap up. I just wanted to make another quick announcement. I didn't have the dates up specifically before, but I did pull them up. So our next webinar will be October the 8th. It's going to be a show and tell panel. As if you saw online, our theme this year is sort of North Carolina and America's 250, even technically the 250th celebrations next year. We just wanted to get a kickoff with that. And our theme is Peoples of North Carolina. And so the sessions will be they will pull things out of their collections and talk about different representation of the peoples of North Carolina. So that is October the 8th from 12 to 1. And then October 29th from 12 to 1, there will be a session on how archives influence art. And those links are online as well. So thank you so much, Ben and Sara. And it looks like there's lots of thank yous in the chats. If you can't see that, we really appreciate you coming and giving us this really interesting talk about AI and transcription.
Yeah, we enjoyed the opportunity. It gave us a chance to develop some of our thoughts a little more.
Absolutely.